All right. Yeah, I usually just check it on my phone on YouTube, so I also just check it. Sweet.
Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys. We're so excited to be here. It's going to be a good topic tonight. And our special guest, not only is she like amazing, but she's a childhood friend of mine. So
Yes.
I'm excited to have her.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Excited to be here.
I think we're at over 20 years, Lorena, of friendship.
Yeah, it's there. We, you know, I was thinking of, you know, because this month is National,
I think we're
yeah, it's like National Child Abuse Prevention. And I was thinking, who can we talk to that can bring light and some great information on this? And the first person I thought was you, Ingrid, because being a social worker, have so much knowledge for us, and we can't wait for you to share it with everybody. I'm just excited. I know the topic is heavy, but it's just exciting to talk to you, and I'll introduce you. Ingrid is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of California with 10 years of postgraduate experience. She holds a bachelor in social work from UCLA. No,
wrong.
CSULA. Yeah,
There you go.
I always confuse that one. And a master's social work from USC. I could see that. Ingrid works in the community mental health as well as online private practice through BetterHelp. She is an immigrant and a cancer survivor. Woohoo! Ingrid loves to travel, dancing, chocolate, and weightlifting. She is truly an amazing person. So I give it up to Ingrid.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I know that this is going to be maybe a heavy topic, and a lot of people might resonate with what's going on. So don't forget to take some deep breaths and take some breaks if you need to. And then I guess we can always talk about afterwards, you know, some things that people can do to kind of get out of this, you know, kind of mental state that can be a little bit heavy for some of us. So I know that you guys wanted to know a little bit about social work as well. So should we start with that? Yeah. Okay. So I got into social work. I already knew what I wanted to do since I was 16 because I, as I mentioned earlier, I had leukemia as a teenager. And through that, I came into contact with some social workers that worked at the hospital, and they were really, really helpful in helping me navigate what was happening. Kind of also helping in with like resources, as far as like helping to pay medical bills. And then they also helped my family, which I noticed was a big thing, because when something happens to a person, whether it be cancer or anything else, it affects all our loved ones, right? So even positive, negative things, it's going to affect everybody around us. So I noticed that they didn't just focus on me, they focused on those people around me and what they needed at the moment as well. So I saw that and I loved it. And I was like, okay, I want to do that right there. And then as I got a little bit older, I learned more about social work itself. And I learned that you can do a lot of different things with it. And that's kind of how I decided to go that route, because then I was like, maybe I want to be a therapist, maybe I want to do this and that. And with a social work degree, I'm able to pretty much do any of those things. So it's not, you know, people kind of have this idea of what social work is just by, you know, what you see in the movies or what you see on TV. And that's kind of a part of social work, but it's a much bigger, and also they don't really show us in the best of lights. So it's not all like that. Yeah. But so yeah, so that's how I got into social work. And here's where I am today. And right now I am working in community mental health. What that means is that there are several agencies in the community that work with whatever, the communities around and whatever their needs are. And mostly they provide mental health needs. So one-on-one therapy, they'll provide case management, just whatever it is that's needed at the moment, but with a mental health perspective. They're usually funded by the Department of Mental Health, and that's how a lot of people are able to get services for free or just really low price, because we know that therapy is pretty expensive and almost inaccessible for the majority of people. So that's one way. And most of our referrals come in from the Department of Child and Family Services, and also known as DCFS, CPS, and other areas. This is the community of the children that get involved with when the government aspect that gets involved when there's a suspicion of child abuse. So most of the clients that we see have some sort of child abuse impact, and that's how they get to us. These kids come from all kinds of backgrounds. The abuse is not always what we like clear-cut abuse, I guess you can say. Obviously, we know what sexual abuse is, we know what physical abuse is, but there's also this kind of middle where it's not so clear and cut. It could be differences in how, just stressors that are going on. Sometimes it could be domestic violence that's going on in the family. It can be substance abuse that's going on in the family. So it's not always literal abuse of in the sense of that you can see bruises and cuts and things like that. Yeah, so those are the kids that come to us. I know there were some questions about how someone can report child abuse. First, one of the things that we want to talk about is that people like therapists, teachers, police officers, and doctors, it kind of varies by state, but mostly people that work with children in some capacity are mandated reporters. That means that if me as a therapist, I have suspicion of child abuse for a client, then I am supposed to report that. And that is a suspicion. I'm not the person to kind of investigate and ask these questions that I'm going to make the decision whether it was abuse or not. That's something that DCFS takes care of. So if you ever have questions about that, you can always kind of try to reach out to someone who's on that capacity and they can help you make a report. But there's also a child abuse hotline, and that hotline is available 24/7 to anybody. And if the number is 1-800-540-4000. That is for LA County. Unfortunately, it's different in all places. But a quick Google search will show you all the numbers. And worst comes to worst, you can always call this number. They can kind of help you and tell you where to go. But that's the number where you would call if you have any suspicion. And I would not be afraid to call. Like, you're not the one that's going to make a decision. If you have a gut feeling, you can make that report, and that is documented. And DCFS then makes a decision whether they need to investigate further, go into the home, things like that. Yes.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Now with the whole social media new era, can you record? Because I recently saw an influencer that somebody sent her a video, she reposted it, of a kid clearly, getting abused, or the mom was just saying some really, really harsh things to the kid, and it was all recorded by a phone. And now with the whole social media, I feel like at the beginning, she posted it. Everybody made comments and called. And at the beginning, they were telling her, you know, ma'am, it's going to take a while. It's a case by case. And if nobody's hurt, then they're not going to come. But I guess they called so many times. They retweeted it. Finally, the cops came like the next day, and they took the kid, 2 kids. So with this, you recommend recording? Like, I'm just like, is it possible that you can record? Like, is that something that we should do as a citizen? Like, we hear something and we're like, this is not okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good question. I'm not really sure what the social workers at DCFS look at it or not, but we have to also remember that it's not always obvious, you know, when there's abuse. So if just because someone calls and gets, you know, they say that this child is getting hit, they're not always going to go into the home and observe and see bruises and cuts. A lot of people that have been hitting their children for a long time, they kind of sometimes know what to do so that it's painful enough, but doesn't leave cuts and bruises and things like that. So if in that case, it might be a good situation. I don't know if it would actually be taken by the social workers on the CFS. I know that they do a really good job about investigating, and if you always get a lot of like if you get someone that's giving you the runaround and they don't know if they should go investigate, you could always hang up, call again, talk to a different social worker. I wouldn't want somebody to get, you know, in the middle of something that can be potentially dangerous for them. So I'm not necessarily going to say go ahead and, you know, put yourself in danger by recording. But, you know, I know that nowadays we need proof. A lot of things happen that are very, very obvious. You know, we've seen several people be mistreated, killed by the police, and even with a video, we get the runaround and maybe it was this, maybe it was this, something else. So it's part of life nowadays, but I don't know if it's something that I would necessarily say that you have to do. You know, make sure that you're safe, and just don't take no for an answer when you're calling. If you have a gut feeling that this is abuse and somebody's in danger, call. Hang up if they don't want to take the report. Call again. You know.
I like that suggestion. You know, 'cause sometimes you get the wrong person and you just give up. But we gotta tell people, don't give up. Call again if you have that gut feeling. You know, and that's a smart, it's a very knowledgeable, you know, I would never think of calling back, you know, but that's something so simple that we can do, you know, just call back, get somebody else and get somebody to notice what you're saying. And as, you know, when you go back to what you were saying about as responsible as a teacher, as a dance teacher, it's a responsibility, you know, in our industry, Janelle. And a lot of people don't see that. A lot of people say, oh, well, I'm just a dance teacher, you know, and it's anybody that has that role or teaches kids has something to say, right? Like it's our responsibility. Like we can't just look away just because we're the dance teachers, correct?
Right. And a lot of the teacher, you know, we know in the dance industry specifically that there has been abuse, whether that's grooming or, you know, things like that has come up pretty recently. But it's been going on for years. Like everyone knows who it is. You know, the dance industry is so small. And the thing is, like these younger kids, you know, they don't know, you know, and it's very important for people that are involved or assistants of this choreographer. I don't know. It's hard because sometimes you don't even know what's happening behind closed doors, you know, like maybe the assistants don't even know. And it's tough to really say, but you kind of really have to look at the signs, right? I don't know if there's signs. I don't, because I wouldn't know where to start in that
Right.
dance industry, like grooming, like what does that look like? If you can tell us a little bit about that, if you know.
Yeah, I mean, signs of, well, I would say that sometimes it's easier to look back and say, oh, there were these signs right here, right? So I don't feel bad if you've learned of a case or know a friend or someone, and then you feel like you didn't see it, right? So sometimes um, these predators are really good about it, so they know how to hide these things, and sometimes it's just easier to look back. But there are some cases where there's definitely signs. When it comes to physical abuse, you'll see bruises, cuts, things like that are not easily explainable. So not in areas where someone would fall or normal, I guess, play around bruises. Or there's like a story that doesn't make a lot of sense when you ask the child, how did you get that bruise or that cut? Or you see very different answers from like the caregiver to the client, to the child. Things like that. Obviously, that in itself is not enough, but that's like something that could give you an idea that something's going on. When it comes to sexual abuse, usually you'll see things like sexualized behavior that is too advanced for that age, right? So sometimes people are kind of amazed to find out that children do engage in some sexual exploration. So just a little bit of exploring or touching and things like that is not necessarily sexual abuse. But when it's things where like, they know certain words that adults maybe use, or behaviors or movements that are sexualized in a way that it's of an advanced age for their age, that's definitely something to look at. There's also things like big changes in behavior, so maybe they're regressing to doing things that they weren't doing anymore. So bedwetting is a big one. Maybe they were very independent and now they're not so independent. Big changes in behavior as far as like all of a sudden they're aggressive or lashing out. But it could also be the other way, where they're just being super compliant. They don't want to they don't want to get in trouble, so they do everything to the T. So look up kind of like extremes. I think it would be a good thing to look at. Definitely changes in behaviors. If you didn't see something before and now it's coming up, then that's a sign that something's going on. It doesn't necessarily have to be abuse, but there's some sort of situation going on that's stressful to the child.
And it's so hard because as a dance teacher, you see some kids, there's some dances that are very sexual. And
yes,
I don't teach like that. I like to have the kids that I teach be kids, because there's only that certain time when you can be a kid. You know what I mean? And I feel like the touching and the extra sexy, sometimes I look at videos and I'm like, oh, they look cute doing it, because I don't think they even know what they're doing. But I feel like that's too much.
Right.
And some of these predators that are in the dance industry that recently came out, and we've the dance community has talked about, now looking back, like you said, you see these kids doing stuff that, like those sexy moves, and you're like, that is not what a 15-year-old or 12-year-old or 10-year-old should be moving like. You know what I mean? And you're like, so it's pretty, but all those signs are very important. And I feel like if you're in a position of leadership and a teacher, it's your responsibility to get those, get this information and notice all these changes and talk to the parents, because, kids are, oh, those little dogs, oopsie. Kids are so vulnerable. It's just so sad.
Yeah, and I think like any adult that's involved with children in any capacity, you know, it's we're like the first line of defense, right? And you don't want it to be like, oh, this feels odd, but I don't know, I'm embarrassed that I'm going to cause trouble, or maybe, you know, I'm just kind of overthinking it. And, you know, we have to think about it in terms that, well, first of all, there has been 50% less calls to the abuse hotline right now. And it doesn't mean that there's 50% less abuse. It just means that we haven't been around kids as much anymore. You know, kids are doing their school, their all their like fun stuff, everything is kind of online. So us people are mandated reporters are not interacting with children as much, so we're not noticing these things. So we got to really keep an eye out. But then the other thing too is that people have this idea sometimes that if you call the hotline, then they're automatically going to come and take you with the child. And it's not always the case. So what they do is that first they kind of evaluate for danger, right? So if it seems like a situation that's super dangerous, then they'll go out right away and they might make the decision to pull the child out. But most of the times they try to kind of either provide services to the family. Maybe there's just a lot of stress going on, right? Maybe they're in need of some more housing, or, you know, whatever it is. Sometimes, you know, if they do take them out of the home, they'll try to place it with a family member so that they're not really like, you know, shocked into a completely different family, or, you know, separated from siblings and things like that. So don't think that just because you're calling and you're not really sure about what the situation is and you don't want to cause trouble, they'll come and investigate. They're trained to kind of see these things. And I know it's a little bit scary because, you know, we see these things with on TV, like, you know, children that people have called the hotline several times, and unfortunately the child does end up dying. And you know, it's like, was it even working? But you know, social workers, they do a lot of work, and they do a lot of great work every single day. And unfortunately, there's going to be some cases that we see like that. But I hope, pray, you know, that it's they're getting what it is, the things that they need little by little, to not make these mistakes, to not be overburdened, and to really be there for the children. It's definitely not without fault. They do need a lot of changes in the department, like any other government agency. But they do really do a lot of great work every single day that we never see.
Yeah, you guys are definitely the heroes. You know, me and Janelle we're doing our research, and I think Janelle looked up, because I know how much work, you know, I know you personally, so I know how much work you do. And I've seen your car full of cases and paperwork, and just like a teacher. And I see that all the toys and all the, you know, all the hours, you know, you don't even have room for any more clients, you know, you're that booked.
Yeah.
So, and then we saw that the payment, remember, Janelle, we were researching, and we were like,
yeah,
you know, you guys should be getting paid more money. You work so hard.
How much per hour
a
social worker makes, and we were like, what? Because it really isn't that much. I feel like I don't know how much you make, and that's okay, but you know, we know that it should be way more than that, because the average is definitely not where it should be.
And just because of the work, you know, and you just said it, like, you guys have so many cases and so little time, and you gotta, but we appreciate everything that you guys do. And that's a lot of good info that Ingrid just gave us. Janelle, want to do the...
Well, yeah, welcome, Claire. Claire has been here before. Thank you, Wendy, for waiting. Yes, I was a victim of sexual abuse growing up, so I just want to let you guys know that. But obviously I didn't have a social worker. It, you know, was, you know, one of those things. I'm from an island. There's a lot of things that happen in this small little island. your cousin or an uncle or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And I did go to therapy, and I didn't have, the toy. Like, luckily I was a little bit older when I did go, but by that time I was already kind of a mess by then. But I've grown, and I've you know changed and things like that. So, and healed from all that. But looking at, that's why I think this is very close to my heart, because any kind of abuse for kids is like, like I hear on the news what we just saw.
Mhm.
If you are in LA, right? That story about the kids that just were, so I know it's a hard thing to talk about, but it's very important. I don't know what the steps were, because I remember the guys like at court, and all these things. So it's like, what could have been done, but again, we don't know. So what prevention exactly can be done in terms of, yes, the hotline? Are there any other prevention methods other than the hotline that we can, put in, like, because this is the prevention month, like,
Mhm.
especially now with COVID, it's like things are happening, you know, so differently. Like you said, you don't see the kids anymore. So what now? Have
Right.
there been like changes in the system, or are there, you know what I mean? Is there something that you guys are doing to help the kids more that are at home?
Well, I, I mean, most of the times we see kids when something's already happened. Um, so sometimes it's just being there, just being there and just adapting to whatever it is they need. I know at my agency we're seeing kids through Zoom. Some are still going into the homes because we understand that not every family is going to have the space, right? Like, 'cause even if you have the computer and the internet, are you going to have the space to kind of really sit here and talk about these like really, really terrible things that have happened to you, or just how you're feeling, where maybe like you just don't have a room where you can be by yourself because you live with a lot of your family members, or people maybe are not very respectful of your space. They don't think it's important what you're doing or whatever it is. So we are adjusting to whatever the needs are, and there are many therapists that are still seeing their clients at the home or in the park or whatever it is that we have to do. So I think, like, I know you mentioned prevention, and there are things that, especially for the type of abuse that comes from stress and from family, where it's like a repetition, like a cycle that continues. Like, you were beat as a child, so now when you're stressed out, you kind of respond in the same way. So I think the way that we kind of can prevent that is to really look at the person and environment and seeing what it is that they need. Do you need to process your trauma, right? So like when we see children, we always work with the families, not just the child. We try to get the parents involved in the therapy, but we also try to kind of maybe get them their own therapy. It's definitely a challenge, but we try to do it. Then what else do you need? Like, do you need a place to stay? Do you need things in the home? Do you need food? What other resources? And then, also focusing on fun and joy and, what brings you happiness. So, if dancing is something that you love, can we bring that in, right? Can we bring it into your life a little bit more so that you are exposed to more happiness, more joy, more laughter? So I think, like, the more that you have that around you, then that kind of helps to prevent. Also having these kind of conversations where we're talking and we're being very real, and you're kind of sharing your own story and stuff like that. It lets other people know that it's okay to talk about it, to talk if there's something odd going on that they don't like, that they can bring it up, that it's a safe space, that it's not taboo anymore. So that's definitely a preventative measure, in that it can prevent something from happening. It can also stop something from continuing to happening, and we don't have to wait for children to grow up to be adults and be like in their 40s and then, you know, opening up, which sometimes doesn't even happen, right? Sometimes people just keep it inside and forever. So the more that we open up and we talk about it and we make it normal of all of our lives, that it's okay to talk about these things, I think that's definitely a preventative measure as well. Yeah, so moments of joy, you know, things like that, and talking about things.
Yeah, that's a good talking about things, because I feel like a lot of taboo on this topic, especially people just don't talk about it. They, you know, especially culturally, they sweep it underneath the rug. You know, I've heard stories of friends of mine or people I know that they tell their mom, and their mom is like, oh, what's your uncle gonna think? Or what is your aunt gonna think? Oh, it's because you wear those short shorts. Or, you know what I mean? Like, they start blaming other people or culturally, you know what I mean? Because nobody talks about it. And
Right.
and I guess these are great, and you know, big platforms now that we have YouTube and social media to talk about it and let people know, hey, you know what happened to you? The verbal or physical abuse, that wasn't normal, and let's talk about it. And then Janelle, you know, you just beautifully shared something with us I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And you're a survivor, and that's amazing. And how you took dance, and that's your therapy. I've always talked to you about, you know, dance, and dance is any physical thing. It just lets you loose and lets you
Dance is healing, everyone. I hope you all dance. I don't know, even if it's just in your room or anything. Hi, Wendy. You can totally speak. Yay!
Yeah, she does.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you have questions? Wow. Right. It does. Yeah, totally. It definitely did a number to me. Like, I was super outgoing. Like, I'm still outgoing, but I was definitely way more vocal, I feel like. And so now I feel like I'm starting to come into my own in my voice now, doing these talks, you know, speaking all the time and just speaking out, talking about it, because now I don't have a lot of shame that I had when I was younger about it. And yeah, because I definitely felt a lot of shame about it, like because it was like young, I was really young at the time, but and it ended, but um I became the kind of abuser, kind of not abuser, but they say not abuser, but you model these things, and then you in turn hurt someone else, and then it's a cycle, right? And then that person will hurt someone else, and then that person, you know, so it becomes this thing. It's just a vicious cycle. And it's it's no one's, you know, that's the first person that did it to you, and then that person, obviously someone must have abused him, you know. So, and it's just looking at like, oh, how can you forgive yourself and you forgive that person who was also abused, you know. It's like, you know, no one really talks about that. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
thank you for sharing.
I appreciate that. um,
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Wendy. We
Thank
thought
you
it
for
was,
being here, Wendy.
yeah.
Yeah, Wendy's a therapist as well, so that's
Awesome.
what she's talking about.
You are in good company.
For a second, I thought, what, don't we, we have a client named Wendy, and I was like, is that the Wendy that,
I know, no, it's not the same Wendy.
and then
He
and then
spells
I
it
was
with
like,
the E.
yeah, oh,
It's
that's why. So
NDE.
welcome. So you're a social worker too, Wendy?
Yes.
Nice.
That's really important too.
Very important. And I think all those roots is everything, just communication. And I
Mhm.
feel
Yes.
like Clubhouse is a great outsource, and YouTube. I know that we're live, but if anybody is watching us, and you can always make comments and questions to Ingrid, and we'll reach back to you guys. But yeah, all these platforms are great, because the more we talk about it, the more we communicate, the more we can share, the more that we know that we're not alone.
Right.
And it's
Right.
and that I feel like some people growing up, we feel, why me? And you just have to understand that everybody, and nobody, nobody's going to be mad at you. You're going to, everybody will come together, you're not alone in this. And that the more you talk about it, the more you release it off your chest, because sometimes you can't hold it in, and then you get this, and
Yeah.
you can't breathe,
Have
or you're
dreams
going to
about it. Like Wendy.
so but
Right.
right.
Maybe
Right.
come.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And oh, off topic, we heard you munching on something. What are you eating, Wendy? I'm like, it's something yummy. I was like, that sounded so good.
I know. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
beauty in Clubhouse. You don't have to see what's going on behind
Uh-huh.
But we
And
heard
we're on
you.
YouTube, but we get to look at each other and kind of see each other's faces, which is nice. To look at everybody on stage here. Claire, do you have anything to ask? How are you? Yeah. Oh my God. It
What
I
is
wasn't
love
that?
papaya. Yeah.
I I don't know what that is, but that sounds amazing.
Where did you get that? Or did you make it?
Never.
All good.
Mhm. Yes.
Very famous.
Yeah. Right. Mhm. Right. Well, the pro I don't think social workers are, thank you for your question, by the way. It's something that it's on everybody's mind, I feel like, and I think you had a good you're thinking about, like, is this right or not? And I think it's not black or white. I think that social workers in DCFS do get overworked. They have really, really high amount of cases, and they're supposed to work in the same capacity as if they had maybe like half or a quarter of those cases. So, there's a little bit of fault in the system in that they are overworked. But social workers are not supposed to, nobody expects them to know things that they can't see, of course, right? But they definitely failed in this case. One, there were several phone calls to the hotline from teachers. It's not something that was hidden. Things people have seen it. There were pictures of the child that the teacher, I think, took. There were a lot of different people calling. There was a lot of documentation that showed, hey, this is happening. It wasn't just, oh, there's one phone call, but there's no evidence, so there's nothing that we can do. There's physical evidence, there's documentation, a lot of things going on. The other thing that they did is that they claimed that they had done their visits. They're supposed to do monthly visits, sometimes more often, sometimes less often, depending on what's going on with the case. But they're supposed to do visits to the home. And of course, if there are announced visits, it's not necessarily going to be a snapshot of what's happening. People sometimes are very good about hiding things, but they weren't even going to these visits, and they were basically committing fraud and writing that they were going. So that's kind of like the whole thing about being overworked and maybe feeling like, I have to show that I'm doing this work even though I'm not able to. But it's still your job, I think it happens to me at work sometimes too. I have a lot of notes that I have to write. I have a lot of things that I have to do, and it sucks. But it's still my job and my responsibility to do them. So I think it was definitely a right move to put them in trial because they did miss a lot of signs and basically committed fraud. But at the same time, the whole system that needs to be an overhaul, because why are they having so many cases, right? There's plenty of money coming in where they shouldn't be having this many cases. So I think that's my personal view as someone that's kind of in the system and working with some of the DCFS social workers and stuff like that. And from what I see as a person seeing, a terrible case like that happen. Sure.
Yeah, especially I know I watched that Netflix about that boy Gabriel, and you haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I've definitely followed the case, but yeah, I couldn't follow it. I couldn't watch it either yet.
But great questions. And the last question, we're almost done, ladies. The last question we just wanted to ask Ingrid is, what advice will you give someone wanting to become a social worker? After all that.
Definitely take care of yourself. As a social worker, whatever area of social work you go into, whether it be the therapy aspect of the DCFS or whatever, you're going to be dealing with heavy, 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 heavy stuff every single day, hour after hour. And we're people just like anybody else. A lot of us come with a lot of the same issues that some of our clients come in, or, you know, we've experienced them, or even if we haven't experienced trauma, we're people experience stress. So definitely your clients are important, but you are important as well. So definitely, I know we hear a lot of self-care, blah, blah, blah. But what does that mean, right? So you have to find what self-care means for you, and it has to be something that you can do. Because sometimes taking yoga class every week, okay, maybe you can't do that. You know, maybe you want to, but you just can't do that every single day. Maybe it's just drinking your favorite cup of coffee every morning, you know, or just taking a few minutes to do just 5 deep breaths, you know, in the morning or nighttime, if you're a night owl like me. So definitely take care of yourself. And I think that goes for everybody, of course, but as a social worker, you have to put yourself first as well, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't really take care of other people. The other thing is that definitely advocate for yourself. And I think, you know, we are definitely underpaid in a lot of ways, but there is money and there is places for us to be. So, I mean, it's an advice that I'm continuously trying to follow myself all the time, but advocate for yourself. Find what gives you passion and then go for it. So maybe it's private practice, maybe it's you know, working within the community, maybe it's changing your job to something else, but always find the joy and know that just because we're not making millions and millions of dollars doesn't mean that you can't live a good, comfortable life. The other thing is be comfortable with documentation. And I think Wendy knows about this as well, because wherever you go, documentation is going to be a huge, huge thing of your life. So even though you're going to love maybe the therapy or maybe whatever it is that you're doing, a huge part of it is going to be documentation and just following criteria and things that you have to do in order to get reimbursed by insurances and things like that. So anybody that works with insurance might kind of feel the same way. But yeah, it's part of the job. And so get comfortable and try to find an organization in the mess, I guess. But know that even when it's hard and stressful, there are several moments that you will experience helping someone, and either it's going to be something that you see that not necessarily that they tell you, or sometimes it's someone that will say, thank you so much, you changed my life, and just makes everything worth it.
Wow. Very nice. Those are good advices. What you know, it's I think that applies almost to anything that you do, you know your worth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And self-care, and that's
find the fun.
And I like how you said, not be realistically like, you're going to set goals 2021 and you set all these goals, you write them down on
right.
Your vision board. Mm-hmm. But realistically, what goals can you do, especially when you have such an overworked tight schedule, you know what I mean?
Basically, find joy. Find joy. And so that doesn't, like sometimes when I'm working with clients and they're like, I really want to get back into running or yoga or all these things that are supposed to be like self-care that we hear about, and they're great. I do it too. But sometimes when we're really, really stressed, it's really, really hard to get involved in these things, be consistent with your eating and blah, 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 blah. So just find joy. And joy doesn't have to be 24/7. It could just be, a phone call with your friend. It could be, going outside and looking at your plants or inside plants, whatever it is, playing with your dog for 2 to 5 minutes before you start doing something that's stressful. Coffee, maybe wine after work. I don't know, whatever it is, just find those little moments of joy and amplify them a little bit. And then you'll get to the yoga every day or every week or whatever it is that you want.
I know you joined to some of my classes. It was nice to see you. And when you were in my classes, I was like, oh, She had some me time. Thank God.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good.
Mhm.
Yes, self-care is so important and finding the fun.
Mhm.
Very good.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Any more? We don't have any more questions, but if Claire or Wendy have any more questions for Ingrid, let us know, ladies. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Nice.
welcome. Yay.
Yay!
I'm glad to have you here.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for
here
coming,
too.
Wendy. It was nice.
Hello.
You know, Clubhouse is nice because you don't see your face. And sometimes I'm eating or washing dishes and I'm listening to something and I'm like, this is awesome. Like I could do stuff while I'm listening to some really educational things or some funny things that happen here on Clubhouse.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
So
Claire, anything? No?
Sure. Mhm. Mhm.
The good. It's a great question, Claire. Thank you for that. Ending on a positive. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I know that when I was studying, in our careers, we have to do internships before we actually graduate. So we basically start working before graduation. And I had a internship teacher tell me that, you're not going to see a lot of change right away, but sometimes it's, the little seeds that you are planting. So maybe I'm not going to see them right away today, but my client 5 years from now will kind of get that little chispa and be like, oh, that made sense. Now I understand what was happening, even if it's like unconscious. And I think that happens a lot. So I feel really good about having that. But I have had some really nice moments, and it is definitely kind of hard to talk about some of these clients without kind of giving away who they are, or the HIPAA violations and stuff like that. But I work with a lot of children, so a lot of them are 0 to 5, and 0 to 5 don't have the ability to really come to you and say, oh, I've learned so much about myself, and things like that. So the way that I see it is when I see changes happening in between the relationship with the parent or the caregiver. I've had some kids that have had a terrible, terrible life history that if you kind of hear about it, you'd first of all be pissed off at the parent. Then maybe if you hear the story of the parent, you might have some sympathy. And I've had a lot of those. And so one of the therapies that I do is called PCIT, and we work with them on the other side of the mirror. And I had this one family with the kids that they were really hard to deal with. They would get really dysregulated, and they would basically bite and throw things and just be really, really hard to deal with. And we have to record these sessions. At least at that point, we were recording them because I was getting trained in them. And I was able to show this family the way that it changed from the first session to the last one. And we sat there and watched it, and they basically were crying. The mom was crying, but the kids didn't really understand. But they were just sitting there, which never would have happened before. They never would have been sat there and watching something. They would have been all over the place throwing things. So those are the kind of things that I kind of hold on to, seeing the difference and seeing that the parent is able to see the positive and the good in the child. They're not seeing their child as, the bad kid or, troublemakers, that they're able to see the positive in that child and build that relationship and strengthen it. And hopefully it keeps going from there. We're not really around them all the time, so I don't know what's happening later on in life. But I can only hope that just that relationship will make all the difference later on in the future. Yeah. Wish I can give you a little more details of these, but it's a little hard to do without giving them away. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
that was
question.
really, yeah, that's really good, because you can, it's the 0 to 5, it's kind of hard to, they're not speak, well, some of them are 5, they speak,
Well,
right?
yeah, at 5 they speak, but you just, it's not the same thing, like
Right.
if you
Not like a kid.
yourself go to therapy, you're going to sit there and maybe you're going to process things, and I might ask you about things that happened to you in the past, and we'll have a conversation. But with a child of that young, you can't really do that. So they process things through play or through their behavior. So they're telling you a lot by how they're behaving. So if it's really aggressive, then there's something going on, right? Like it's too much for them. They don't know how to handle all the emotions that are happening. Sometimes they're like super withdrawn, things like that. So those are the cues that we get from them. Their behavior is how they communicate what's going on with them. But even though they can talk, it's hard for them to be like, I feel this, or even if they can tell you why they feel that or how they feel, they might not be able to tell you why they feel that. So,
Right.
Yeah. Mhm. Right. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, they go through a lot.
Yeah. I teach 0 through 5. Well, not 0 through 5. I teach 3 to 9-year-olds, but they're like English. I teach ESL too. So, yeah, that has nothing to do with this, but I just can see the kids and their behaviors, and I look at that and the culture of the Chinese, and I look at that, I'm like, I'm sure there's abuse in there somewhere.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now that we learned so much from Ingrid, we're going to be like, just looking around and
yeah, just looking and observing.
And that's a good thing, and talking, because that's why we invited her, because we want people to don't be afraid of talking about this, be observant, have, pay attention. There's a lot of signs, like what she said, there's a lot of signs, and don't be afraid of mentioning it and talking. Sometimes we say, oh, that's somebody else's business, let's not get involved, and we just walk away. But we shouldn't, because these are kids that we're talking about, and nobody, adults or kids or animals or anything should ever have a hard life like what you said, from 0 to 5. That's crazy. That's ludicrous to think a kid from 0 to 5 has a horrible life.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Ingrid.
Thank you so much, Ingrid.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And for all the questions. That was great. Wendy, Claire, thank you for sticking it out with us. We appreciate you, ladies.
Yes. Well, thank you and good night. Thank you, Ingrid, again for your time.
Thank you for being here.
Good night.
Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Wendy. Good night, guys.
Okay, bye.
We could stay in YouTube. Oh, are you gonna